I will take you with me. You might learn something.
About soccer?
Nah, mate. Not about soccer. And for fuck's sake, stop saying soccer!
If you are a steady listener of The Assistant Professor of Football, you will probably have figured out that the intro dialogue you hear every 2 weeks here is from the movie Green Street. It's a drama around an American, who's played by Elijah Wood, who visits London and becomes deeply involved in West Ham United's hooligan culture. It's a bad movie in many ways, but in the eyes of many who have seen it, it's a first encounter with the former Thames Ironworks football club from East London's Docklands, later known as West Ham United, and now, of course, a staple of the Premier League. Or you might be familiar with West Ham's stadium song. It's taken from a soap commercial. It's called I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles, and it describes dreams who, like bubbles, nearly reach the sky, and then they fade, and then they die. And it all feeds into the romantic notion of a somewhat tragic, but always hopeful and lovable soccer club. However, a famous version from the Cockney Rejects, East London Legends of Oi Punk, sounds a little bit more harsh, like this.
I'm forever blowing bubbles, pretty bubbles in the air. They fly so high that they reach the sky, and like my dreams, they fade and die. Fortune's always hiding. I've looked everywhere. I'm forever blowing bubbles.
I've let slip before that I happen to support West Ham United, even though I long resisted supporting anything in the Premier League. And I want to make clear that this is not a fans episode. But it was 2015, I was in graduate school and on a conference and research stay in London, and I did a few stadium tours. When I arrived at West Ham Stadium, the Boleyn Ground, or Upton Park, in a pretty rundown neighborhood, there was no stadium tour there. But there was a friendly guard who offered to show me around, and he led me on the pitch and let me take pictures, and a few days later I came back to attend the pre-season friendly game. I was struck with the culture and the history of the club, which resembles in some ways the ethos of Sturm Graz, the Austrian club I had grown up with as well, and, well, now I'm stuck with West Ham. That stadium is no more. The Cockney Rejects themselves played a concert there after the last game, and in its place are now apartments. Since 2016, West Ham now play at the London Stadium, the former Olympic Stadium, just 3 miles away, and in East London as well. And the club have undergone a severe identity crisis since then that can't be papered over even by success on the pitch. West Ham is not owned by global billionaires, but by sometimes shrewd and often bumbling rich guys from a, well, shadier side of the British economy. Still, West Ham have seen large-scale fan protests over the stadium move, the club's identity, the owner's approach to fans, and the matchday experience. And that culminated in a pitch invasion at a home game in 2018, which, in turn, kicked off the fan movement we'll get to know today. Our guest is Andy Payne from Hammers United, an 18,000-member strong fan advocacy group. As you will see, Andy is an entertaining conversationalist with a deep love and hope for his club. He's Hammers United's representative on West Ham's Independent Supporters Council. He's also an entrepreneur from the video games world with a big picture view of the future of soccer more broadly. We roll up West Ham's recent history, from toxic game days and the pitch invasion, to present-day challenges and the future of fan involvement in soccer. And if you enjoy our different kinds of soccer conversations here and would like to help spread them, please do leave a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen. It's really meaningful to me. It's really easy to click on these stars, and it does help me a lot to spread what's going on here. Thank you so much. Spread the word wherever you find intelligent and curious soccer fans just like you. And now off to East London and to Andy Payne. Welcome, Andy, and thank you for your time. Thanks for being on here and sharing with us a little bit about what organized fans at West Ham United have done to address that club's identity crisis and to advocate for change. We are also, I'm sure, going to learn in the process what fans in general can do in relation to their clubs. So before we go there, could you give us a little bit of your soccer biography? When did you start going to games? Did you play yourself? And what's your story with West Ham United and East London in particular?
Thank you, Philip. I was born in Walthamstow, E17. Traditionally, you'd probably say that's a Spurs/West Ham area. Parents were from Leighton, which is the West Ham area, E10. My grandfather was in the house when I was born. He lived with us. Born in Canning Town, for those that know that area, the old traditional docks. Grandfather was a West Ham season ticket holder from a very early age. And so in my house, there was no choice. It was, Granddad says you're West Ham, that's the way you're going to go. And I can remember that. I can't remember anything else. So my love of football, my love of horse racing comes from my grandfather, who just taught me all about everything. Played football at an amateur level poorly. Went to school, we played rugby and cricket. So, it wasn't easy. But football's always been my game, and it's given me a wonderful life as a supporter. I've followed England away for 40 years, went to the first, and I've been to 9 World Cups. And I've seen a lot of changes, and I've gone through a lot of changes myself. But I find the England away trips for tournaments, for Euros and for World Cups to be some of the most hilarious times that I've had with my friends, and sometimes scary. But those times are further away as I get older. So that's my connection with West Ham.
It's not the easiest London club to support, especially during this period. When it comes to titles and successes, have you been able to pass that on to the next generation as well?
I managed to get my nephew, who had foolishly decided, he is in the Midlands, he's foolishly decided he was going to support Manchester United. Not great if you're a West Ham fan. I've got plenty of Man United mates out there, so no offence. But when we played Liverpool in the FA Cup final, he was a 6 or 7 year old, and he felt that, because obviously we were at the game live, he wasn't watching on television. He felt West Ham were hard done by, second division team playing against Liverpool. They were hard done by, so he thought, I feel sympathetic, and he decided to, tear down his Man United wallpaper and his bedspread and everything else and get West Ham stuff. And I warned him at the time. I said, listen, Jacob, supporting West Ham, like most teams, is a life sentence, okay? You come over to our side, that's great, but remember, we aren't going to win the stuff Man United win. We'll win or have won and continue to win. We're just not that. It was just not that club. So, it's always been, to be a West Ham fan, like most football fans, you've got to have a fairly black sense of humour. You've got to feel dark. You've got to remember that the good times will be far outnumbered by the bad times. And the hope will kill you. But when you get a good time and it comes along, it's great. But football's not all just about what goes on that pitch. It's a lot more. It's our culture. We British, English, call us what you like, West Ham fans, whatever. We really do believe in, we've got a culture. It's like in England, it's football, music and fashion, right? And that's what my age group grew up on. It's how you looked, what you listened to, and what your terrace humour and culture was about.
2016, West Ham United moved from Upton Park, the home of basically all of our history, traditional neighbourhood football ground, to the new London Stadium, which is still in East London and not that far away, but in some ways in a different world in terms of the matchday experience. How is that like for you nowadays?
I have got a season ticket in a decent part of the ground, in the sort of where the managers sit. I'm just above that. So it's a good seat in what I still think is a poor ground. I don't think that ground is ever going to, nothing's going to persuade me that that is a football ground until it becomes a football ground. And right now, architecturally, I'm afraid it is not, in my view, a football ground. It's not to say Upton Park was a whole load better. And in fact, over the years, Upton Park had, fans had got moved further and further away from the pitch because of expansion. But I still feel that West Ham, don't own their ground. We don't have a say as a result of that over what we can do in that ground. For visiting supporters, when they kind of come and see it for the first time from the outside, it looks very impressive, very sort of American. It's all kind of the sugariest drink on the planet. It looks fantastic from the outside. You approach generally from Stratford. It's an international railway station, wonderfully connected. And it's the Olympic Park. It was, only 10, 11 years ago now that, the 2012 Olympics were held there. Very impressive.
Right. That whole Olympic area, in a way, is the story of the transformation and of the onward and upward of East London. And you could write West Ham's story right into that from the surface view. And then you step inside the stadium. You tell the story.
You then get into the ground and it's not so great. And I'll be blunt about it. It's just not so great. It's windy. It's rubbish. There's all kinds of stuff. However, it's probably a culture shock for those fans of a certain age who used to travel to Upton Park as away fans. And they think, wow, West Ham look like they've kind of moved up a little bit in terms of prestige. But most fans who know, friends of mine who've come to West Ham for the first time, we've obviously been there for 6 seasons now, so that's becoming less people for the first time, are all, or will all say to me, without prompting, it's not Upton Park, which is like fact, right? Obviously. But what they go on to say is like, crikey, there's no atmosphere, there's no nothing. The atmosphere's got a little bit better in recent times because the team's performances have improved, and there's no doubt about it. Last season, the night games against particularly Sevilla were just astonishing. It was one of those nights which I'll never forget. But those are few and far between, let's face it. And
well, the atmosphere was probably at its lowest and most toxic on the day that we are starting the story of Hammers United and of the argument over West Ham's identity and future within the fan circles and between fans and the club. And that day would be March 10th, 2018. West Ham had just moved to the new stadium the season before. Upton Park, by now, I think, is being demolished, correct?
It was undergoing demolition.
It was undergoing demolition. West Ham is undergoing demolition on the pitch as well. It's in a relegation battle. And so you add the misery on the pitch to the unfulfilled promises of the next level of football in East London. Instead, you have a chaos club in leadership and how the club is run and how fans feel treated. And you have chaos on the pitch as well. Could you let me know how that day felt like for you, how you experienced that? And we'll start the story of Hammers United from there.
So I remember the day really well, and I was not part of any protest or any movement up to that point. As an engaged, loyal, experienced, knowledgeable West Ham fan, my initial feelings when West Ham was bought by the current owners from the Icelandic owners, my initial feelings about that were bad, about those owners.
Just for clarification, when was that? When was the purchase? The Icelandic owners basically went bankrupt.
2010.
Right. And the new owners are?
The new owners are David Sullivan and the recently deceased, rest in peace, David Gold, ably assisted by Karen Brady. They were the owners. They took the club over. But they'd had a very checkered record at Birmingham City. When they arrived at West Ham, Gianfranco Zola was our manager. Probably not our best manager, to be fair, that we've had, but certainly not our worst. But we soon got the worst manager we've ever had. A character called Avram Grant, who had, won the Champions League at Chelsea, apparently. Avram Grant was totally and utterly unsuitable for West Ham, clueless in every respect. And I have to say, early in his career at West Ham, everything went wrong. And people like me were not surprised. However, he became a slight cult hero because I can remember it was the season that he was going to get the sack, which I think he was only there for a short time. And then we all went to Wigan for the last away game of the season. And I think, if I remember rightly, West Ham went 2-0 up and we lost 3-2 and we got relegated. And Scott Parker was our club captain at the time, who's been a legend everywhere he's played. Charlton, Spurs, Chelsea, West Ham. Scott Parker's always been brilliant. All fans love him. Impossible to know how a man of such a short man can make such massive tackles and never break his own legs. But anyway, Scott Parker tells the story, which he left West Ham at the end of that season and went to Spurs. He tells the story that, Avram Grant by this time had a kind of weird cult status of being so bad that we kind of liked him. Avram Grant had been told by David Sullivan to get off the team bus and make his own way home because he was sacked. And Scott Parker, on behalf of the team, said, look, this is wrong. And they're overruled. And then I don't know whether Grant was taken on or not, but that showed you early on what we were dealing with. Then we had all this fan engagement. I say engagement. Nobody ever asked us about moving to the Olympic Stadium, and as it was called then, and how great it was going to be. And in the end, we moved. And as you say, Philip, it was there to deliver the next level, which I remember being specifically Champions League football. We all looked at each other and thought to ourselves, well, maybe the Champions League will be the top 10 of the Premier League, not the top 4. So we had all been sold the dream. Some of us perhaps didn't believe it. Maybe you can call us cynical, but things had been brewing for a long time. And that dark old day in March, Sean Dyche's Burnley always gave West Ham a tough game. They came down and they beat us 3-0, and it went badly wrong for the owners of the club. I can remember a certain West Ham fan coming out of the where I sit, sort of diagonally opposite, opposite the tunnel to the left as I sit, coming on, grabbing the corner flag, running onto the middle of the centre circle, placing it down as if to say, right, enough's enough. He wasn't violent. He had a cap on. He looked like a character out of Peaky Blinders. And I thought, I recognise him. And then there was other scuffles. But it did turn quite nasty because where we sit in the slightly expensive seats, I suppose, the directors sit slightly above us. The owners sit above us. And they were effectively barricaded in by fans who just said, you're not going anywhere. And I would not have wanted to be there that day. It was dark and horrible. Did they deserve it? Who knows? But it happened. And I think that was something that, at the time, my friend who I sit with was astonished about why it all happened. I said, I know exactly what's going on here.
Much of the fans' frustrations, there are an increasing number of West Ham United supporters massing in front of the director's box. I'm not sure I've ever seen anything quite like this. Now there's another supporter who's decided to take matters into his own hands, and that really isn't helping. Sullivan has had enough. And have been advised to leave the area of the director's box down in front of us. That is the sight that has been in front of him for the last, it must be 15 minutes or so.
The man who ran on the pitch with the corner flag, it was a hark back to an older protest where a corner flag was also involved. Early 90s, different story.
Yes.
He said, him, looks familiar. It's, of course, Paul Colborne, also known as Bubbles, and we will talk about him and his role in the foundation of Hammers United here in a little bit. The reaction that I get from knowledgeable friends at times when I mention this story a little bit, and also then recent protests against ownership is, well, you just protest because you're playing badly. You're just frustrated because things aren't going well on the pitch. it's my impression that there's much more going on at West Ham at this point in 2018, and that what we see on the pitch is a bit of a symptom. But the frustrations around the club are really about culture as much as they are about performance. Am I naive here, or is that some of what you referenced to when you said to your friend that day, "I know exactly what's going on here"?
Yeah, I think this is something that probably quite a lot of football fans feel. I'll only speak about fans in the UK because I think there's a difference for the wrong reasons in the UK. So generally speaking, our owners buy the business or had in the family, whatever it may be. All of our football clubs relate back to the Industrial Revolution in Britain. And they're going to be in places of industry, and they're going to be in places of ports and commerce, and that maps absolutely. But the owners of these football clubs, perhaps not always fit for purpose, but it's a very difficult thing to be a football club owner because you've got fans involved, and at the moment and forever up to this point, fans have been born into it, like I was. And then other fans choose to get into it, but you get in at an early age, right? Your commitment is early. You don't start supporting a football club when you're 23. You kind of start under the age of perhaps 9 or 10. And so it's a sort of, it's almost like, you don't play Nintendo games. You don't start playing Nintendo games when you're 23. You start to play them when you're young. And, that's how it works, right? So this relationship where a club is owned by a business or physical people, it's not like owning another business, except it is. Legally, it is. They own the business. Whoever it is, they own the business. They can do what they like with the business. But there is this thing called the culture, the history, and the legacy. These things are really important. Maybe they won't be in the future. Maybe that stuff will be meaningless. I don't know. I doubt it. But I think it's a really difficult thing. So football fans like me, like you, like everybody else, we want our teams to do really well. We want to win things because that's what validates us as fans, really, ultimately. I mean, winning something is nice as opposed to losing. But also we want to know what we're part of. What's the identity? Where do we come from? You don't know where you're going to go until you know where you've come from. And I think that's really, really important. And I think you need, it's almost unique with sports teams because, it's not a product, okay? And the ownership's really, really tough so I've got sympathy with the owners of football clubs, okay? I'll declare that immediately. It's not easy. But they are only ever guardians, right? Because there is a responsibility to the community and to the club history. For example, West Ham decided, apparently they consulted the fans, and again, we must not have got the letters or the emails, but they changed the club badge when we moved. Okay, they changed it from what was a castle with crossed hammers to just crossed hammers.
And the word
right?
the word London underneath it, right? Isn't that
to add insult to injury? Yeah. We're now called West Ham London on that badge. Now, the last time I looked, you don't have to know West Ham's in London. And are we really seriously saying we've got to put London on there for some kind of global recognition? Do Arsenal call themselves Arsenal London? Chelsea London? Tottenham Hotspur London? Millwall London? No, of course they don't. I mean, Look, this is ludicrous. And that was apparently through fan engagement. None of us knew how that engagement happened, but apparently it did. Now we're lumbered with that badge.
Well, let me ask it like this. I'll give you two possible angles at this and then see where within those, in the middle somewhere, Hammers United as a movement of protest, as a movement of change, kind of locates itself. The one angle would be, well, the castle has only been in the crest for a while anyways. It was always crossed hammers all along. London Stadium isn't that far away from Upton Park. It's still in East London, and Upton Park has been, well, allowed to fall apart for some reason, and it was clear that the club needed to move on. Things will come good on the pitch. Just let them do their work. And what are you moaning about? It's the one angle. The other one would be one that I come out of more. I grew up in a very active fan culture, Sturm Graz, and protests against ownership, and the attempt to preserve our old ground, our old stadium, looms large in the club's identity struggles over the last decades. Why have West Ham fans allowed the move to London Stadium to go without protests in the first place? And the move to a new crest go without protests in the first place? Why only come in now at the Burnley game when things go bad on the pitch and protest now? Why haven't you been at this all along? Where within those two poles would Amherst United locate themselves?
Yeah, no, look, I don't think people generally like change. I think that's a human condition. Some of us do, but you're right. Our original club badge was just hammers, so they could be saying, "Well, we're stripping out that castle," but we felt that the way it was done was wrong. Okay, if you've got owners that profess to want to listen to fans and take fans seriously, okay, then it's got to be a two-way street. It can't be broadcast only, right? There's no point having fan engagement if the fans are not allowed to say anything and worse still not be listened to. Does that mean that everything the fans want they're going to get? No, it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. But like everything, owners believe that they can do whatever they like. And under UK law, they can, right? You know, their first responsibility as a company director under UK law is to the shareholders. So if the fans are not shareholders, right, then there is no legal responsibility for them to do anything at all. And they will argue, rightly, that they've got to create the funds in order to be able to compete in the transfer market. Because if they don't compete in the transfer market, then success is going to be a very, very long corner to get round. So I think there's arguments on both sides of this. Where Hammers United come in is, okay, we need to be part of that discussion, part of that consultation, ongoing relationship. And we need to ask questions of the club and be their critical friends, all right? And they can do the same with us, by the way. So we need to know by asking our fans, our members, what do we think we need? Where's the key issues here? What are we worried about? Is it pricing of tickets? Is it the atmosphere in the ground? Is it the club badge? Is it free away travel for night games? Is it all these things? Okay. Is it having so many kits every season that we're just ruining the planet? You know, all that stuff. Some of that stuff won't mean anything to a lot of fans because what you said right at the beginning is fans actually want to win. If the football team is doing well on the pitch, then it's an easier place to be a fan and an easier place to be a player and an easier place to be an owner. And I think West Ham have had 2 seasons, decent seasons, where we've had European football. Now, the wheels have come off at West Ham and everyone's scratching their head and wondering why. So I think Hammers United just want to be a voice for as many fans as possible to be taken seriously and professionally work with the club in order to get positive changes for the fans, which are real, you know, so that, yes, the price of football is really important because if it is going to be more and more increasingly expensive, it's going to close out the very people the football club was set up to support in the first place. And that can't possibly be right. But right at the beginning, we talked about the difference between UK clubs and other national clubs. And one of the things is that, you know, supporters aren't able to take part. They don't have a like in Germany, there's that sort of 50+1 law.
Yeah, and it's not member owned. Yeah.
Yeah, and it shows. So I don't know how we resolve that. We are expecting very soon the UK government's white paper, which is the piece of the process before an act of parliament, i.e. a law, the way it works then is the paper will come out. There's a public consultation. Government say, what do you like? Do you like this? Is it good? And then they will start to knock that into an act of parliament, which will, a bill which becomes an act of parliament and passes into UK law. Potentially a football regulator will be built. And we have regulations in gambling. We have regulations in food standards, etc. So a regulator for football, we'll see. I mean, I personally think it would be a good idea because some of the ownership, some of the people who own British football clubs has been very, very questionable. Where's the money come from? Who are they? What's their long-term plan? The answer is, where's the money come from? Well, you don't want to know. Who are they? You don't want to know. What's their long-term plan? They don't know, right? So, you've just got massive messes that are happening with ownership. Now, I think everything's stepping up. We've seen Saudi Arabia affected by Newcastle United. They might wonder if they should have held on to buy Liverpool or Manchester United or indeed Tottenham Hotspur. But their friends or enemies, whoever they are this week in Qatar, will be buying either Tottenham Hotspur, Liverpool, Manchester United. This is weapons grade ownership in the nation states. They're going to be able to outbid anybody for anything. So we see that at Manchester City. And so it's where we are.
In comparison, West Ham United is stuck with a dubious figure, to be sure, but at least it's kind of the devil you could say, no?
I agree with you. There's an argument that says the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. I kind of come from the old school of I'd rather not deal with any devil. Okay? Screw all devils, let's just deal with some good people. Where's Jesus when we need him? So,
this should be the episode title. Where's Jesus when we need him?
Where's Jesus and Mohammed when we need him, right?
So let's tie Hammers United a little bit back in here again. You already gave us the higher altitude outlook on where English football may or may not be headed, but the protests were not without consequences. For one, the guy who ran on the pitch, Paul Colborne, received a stadium ban and became a co-founder of Hammers United. Today, 18,000 members strong, and a considerable force in fan representation at West Ham. What is the story there? And what is the constituency you represent? And who are the people most involved in the protests, in the lobbying, and in contacting the club?
We are, and it's not down to one person, Paul Colborne, but I tell you, without Paul Colborne, this would not have happened. So Paul has got, I believe, a lifetime ban from entering the stadium at West Ham. Which is the club's decision. He ran on the pitch, put a flag down. He didn't do anything else, but that's a lifetime ban. So maybe he stood up for fans, maybe speaking his mind. It's the land of free speech and all that stuff. And he gets a lifetime ban. But Paul, what I love about Paul is that he is a very straight talking process person. He's an old union man, and it shows. And he understands representation, and he understands that most people will have an opinion, but few people will do much about it because they've got busy lives. They've got their kids to do, or look after their parents, or trying to find a job, or trying to pay their energy bills. So Paul assembled a group of like-minded people, and that's been that's been over time. It wasn't all at once. But Paul is a very capable, very driven, very, very deep West Ham fan. And he wants to see West Ham led at every level with dignity, and he wants to see it with vision, as well as having a respect for the past and the culture of the club. And what he really doesn't like, and I think it's the same with all of us, is anyone trying to con us that they're doing that and they've got our best interests in heart, and we can see with our own eyes that doesn't always happen. So that's the reason why when Paul asked me would I like to help, I said I'll try. And I currently am the Hammers United representative on the Independent Supporters Committee, the ISC. at West Ham, and we sit with other supporters groups. There's 10 of us in total.
I guess, as always, in settings that are so fraught with questions of culture, of identity, which are all fuzzy categories, how do you measure effective engagement with the club you love?
Is it effective? It's been effective. Is it effective right now? Sort of. Could we always do a better job? Yes. But remember, when you put yourself in as a representative on a democratic basis, you cannot please everybody on every single thing. But what you can do is ask people for opinions, for, what would you like to see change? What's going well? What can we do better? And then you've got to sit down and figure out what you're going to be able to prioritize. And then you've got to try and persuade the football club to listen. And you've got to frame arguments that persuade the club because it's in their interest to do so. And that has to be around, fan culture. It has to be for a reason. Yes, we've protested and we've been very, very successful at that. But now we're at the table, if you like. We have to use diplomatic skills. Let's put it that way. And is that always to the liking of all of our members? Absolutely not. Because they want to see more protests, more militancy, and as you said earlier, as the results start to get a bit challenging, then people either disengage or get more enraged, one or the other. So I do think it's a tough time. I think, on the human side of things, David Gold passed away a few weeks ago after a short illness.
We should say David Gold, one of the two owners who bought the club together with David Sullivan. And the G in the slogan, GSB out, Gold, Sullivan, Brady out.
There's no doubt about it. David Gold was born on Green Street, I think it was 442, and he opposite the ground, okay? So played for West Ham boys, always wanted to be part of West Ham, and he got his dream, and that's fair enough. It was interesting when they took pictures of his, laying the wreath. The funeral cortege went from the London Stadium, what used to be called the Olympic Stadium, where West Ham play, and went driving around to the old ground and back again. The pictures they took, were, from his house showing the wreath, and then you see opposite is a new block of flats. That used to be Upton Park. So there was a sort of irony there. Those pictures, I think, got taken down pretty quickly when someone realised that's probably not the ideal thing to do.
David Gold's also the one who said right before the move from Upton Park to the London Olympic Stadium that West Ham fans have nothing to worry about. They will not be any farther away from the pitch and the atmosphere will change, and he kind of guarantees for that. Just throw that in.
Look, there's no doubt about it. 62,000 fans, that ground can hold. There's a lot more people who can gain access to West Ham than they ever did at Upton Park, frankly. That's probably going to be a good thing for building the fan base, provided the pricing is kept assured. Then that's probably a good thing. So yes, I'm not going to tell you and sit here and say everything about moving the stadium is wrong. It's wrong to say that. The way in which it was done and the attempt to tell people that it had all been done with consultation, an adequate process, that's the bit I think a lot of people thought, hang on a minute, I don't remember being asked about this stuff.
I was born a mile away from the bowling ground. Every Saturday, blowing bubbles all around. There was life in the old days then. Shame it's got to end. Wherever you may be it over land or sea, sing goodbye.
ownership is the one thing, and a lot of the fans' ire on that day against Burley in front of the director's box was directed to Gold and to David Sullivan as well, the other owner. But it strikes me that a particularly interesting figure to talk about here is Karen Brady, who is not an owner, but upper-level management, came in with the two owners and is a lightning rod along a lot of the issues that Hammers United look at and lobby for. So identity, fan consultations, club culture, club museum, a lot of these day-to-day things, the branding as well, right? The crest, a lot of these things hinge on management. How does that work? How is that kind of interaction with the club at that level, where it's not just we want owners out and we don't want the devil we know, we want somebody a little closer to Jesus, but the people that work for these owners and the stake that they have in the club? How's that interaction?
It's very challenging because Karen Brady came to West Ham having been at Birmingham as part of Sullivan and Gold's ownership structure. She's part of the package. I think, to be fair to Karen Brady, she does the work. Okay. But Brady, Sullivan and Gold were an unholy or holy trinity, whichever way you look at it. There wasn't any dissection going on. Now it's two. So I think, some wag was sort of, instead of GSB out, it's kind of going to turn to BS out. Figure that one out if you want to. But yeah, look, this isn't easy because we are viewed at Hammers United as a, formerly, potentially, currently angry protest group of quite hardcore fans who really don't like the owners. And that's true. Okay, there's no point in us pretending otherwise. But I would contend that we go back to that crux of legally, these guys are the owners of the club. Under UK law, they're legally the owners, but there is a difference. And the difference is that they are custodians as well as legal owners. And I think unless and until owners understand that, then I think we're all moving in opposite directions. We've been referred to, not Hammers United, not West Ham fans, but in amongst Premier League language, we're now referred to as legacy fans because we've got old-fashioned ideas about what we're entitled to and what we're not entitled to. Okay? Well, then we're talked about as customers. Okay? It's like, well, okay. We can't really take our custom elsewhere, as for reasons that, I tried to explain at the beginning, and hopefully listeners to this podcast who are interested in football will completely get, because it's like, we don't really have much of a choice in this. So if I want to withdraw my labour and my custom from West Ham, I might as well just go and get a knife out of the drawer and cut the end of my nose off, right? Because that's about as good as it's going to get. So, it's tricky, this stuff. But we do not like our owners, and we'll make no bones about that. But we believe, on behalf of fans, and certainly Hammers United members, that we've got to do a better job on behalf of the fans to remind the current owners of the legacy, of the culture, of what is expected, and how to deal and respect fans, rather than just, i.e. taking us for granted, possibly, or indeed just going, we don't care what you say anyway.
Yeah, the assumption here is as you, I think, said, nicely wrapped up in the word customer. Football clubs cater to customers now rather than to participants, to carriers of a legacy, to supporters, I always like the word followers. There's something dynamic in there that embraces change, but there's also a sense of tribalism in there that I think is quite accurate. Look, we've invested lots of time being West Ham fans. We don't expect to be sort of patted on the back for it. We don't expect to sort of be getting medals. We just expect a bit of respect, frankly. And I think that's the thing that makes football clubs tricky to own. And I'm not entirely sure that owners who, come from
places where money is everything. I don't think they necessarily get that stuff.
West Ham is historically is a messy club. It's an unwieldy club. It has a large, very loyal fan base that's seen some successes and a lot of deep disappointments as well. It's not Brightford or Brenton or Leicester in a way that are easier to manage or to own, perhaps. In that context that West Ham is in, what are concrete steps that Hammers United is pushing for on a daily basis right now to grow, transform the culture, and do so along the roots of that club and alongside the lines of identity of that club?
I would say that you start with first principles. You almost need an amnesty to say the club need to put their hands up and say, listen, you know, we haven't done these things the right way. We haven't always listened. And the fan groups need to say, yeah, maybe we've been a bit unreasonable sometimes because we get pushed. So why don't we all stop that? But why don't we sign up to a proper, transparent club-fan relationship? Proper, transparent, where meetings are recorded like, they're recorded like this, and they're matter of public record. Why do we have to have things agreed behind closed doors in smoky rooms? Let's just have the whole thing out in the open. You know what? It's hard running a football club. I've never run one, but I wouldn't want to, but it's hard. You know what? It's hard being a fan. I have been one. It's not as hard as running a football club. So if everyone was just to say, okay, let's start again. Let's really try and build something. And if you look at what's happened at Eintracht Frankfurt, okay, it's a really good example of when the fan base get engaged and get encouraged to be engaged. Look at what happened last season with those guys. I mean, look at they bought the Barcelona tickets, which is brilliant.
Yes, this is referring to the Europa League match when basically the Nou Camp Stadium was packed up with Eintracht Frankfurt fans. Difference, though, again, this is a member-owned club. We don't have the same structure in England. Is there a kind of a middle way between that member-owned scheme and the current complete dependence on owners and on the dynamics of the economy?
I think there has to be, and I think there has to be the opportunity for that to happen. And if fans don't want it, then that's the end of the matter. Okay, leave it to the owners, let them get on with it. Okay, but if there's an opportunity for it to happen, and there's a mechanism, and we can create the legacy for the future, then let's just get on with it. I think everyone needs to just climb down a bit and be a bit more respectful, and that starts with transparency.
Hammers United advocates on a number of small issues that concern fans and their relation to the club, from ticketing to the lagging move of the club museum to the new stadium. What about some of the bigger things, the outward signs of identity and the atmosphere that you mentioned earlier? There's the crest, and there's also the obvious issue of the London Stadium. And it just doesn't feel like the old home. What can be done? What do you do to make this place feel more like an East London home that West Ham deserve and clearly need?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a fundamental problem with the stadium and its access. Okay, so right from the beginning, for those people who've never been to the new West Ham location, you basically go through a massive shopping centre on the way there. On the way out of games afterwards, it's all shut. So getting back to Stratford Station, which is a world-class transport hub, what's not world-class is the way you get there from West Ham Stadium. You're pushed all around the houses. Nobody knows anything. You've got stewards and people pushing you all over the place, and it's useless. Why? Because the owners of the of Westfield, the shopping centre, don't want anyone going back through it, after the match on a Saturday or whatever it may be. That's a problem.
Could you go from and come to Hackney Wick?
Yeah, well, I'm lucky enough to be on that side of the stadium, and
much more charming that way.
It's a much better way. Good local knowledge there, Phillips. Well done stuff. But yeah, I mean, yes, of course you could, and yes, many do, but the vast majority don't. So whenever you have the misfortune to go back to Stratford, It's chaotic after the match. Not owning our ground, the access to the ground via roads. There's no taxi ranks. There's no disabled parking and stuff like that. All becomes much more difficult. And I think that the fact that it's not our stadium, the club don't own the stadium, they can't make the changes that they want, seemingly. This year, two things have happened this season. Magically, from nowhere, a wall has gone up between the West Ham fans that sit on the side I sit, but they're adjacent to the away section. The wall's gone up. For anybody sitting anywhere near that wall, it's affected the atmosphere. Okay, it doesn't affect the view of the pitch, but it affects the atmosphere.
You should explain that wall, it's a dark red clary wall, West Ham colored wall, is between a section of the West Ham fans and the away fans, where there's been a lot of throwing of projectiles, coins, beer, even water coolers back and forth last season. The problem now is the wall is tall enough so you can see over it, but it is short enough that you can still throw stuff over it. So you can throw stuff. It's just the other side doesn't see the stuff coming anymore, and it doesn't really help the safety in the area at all. Is that right?
I would say that's a very well observed observation. Again, West Ham don't. The stadium outsources the beverages and the refreshments to a company called Delaware. They are, I think, a Canadian company. The prices are astonishing, and we pointed this out at Hammers United at the beginning of the season. First match, took pictures. What's going on here? You know, massive amount of money for a pint of beer, equally massive amount of money for beer with no alcohol in it because they can. And we were told that the club was absolutely disgusted by this. Thank you for pointing it out. And they were taking it up with the supplier. Legally, the supplier, Delaware, was supposed to have the same prices for other football clubs that they serve within the radius, and I believe that Spurs are involved in that, and our prices are more expensive. So things like that just don't get done. So there's two examples there of stuff that's just not fit for purpose, and it would be much better if we could get resolution to that, you know. But being told, yes, it's going to be attended to. I mean, we're over halfway through the season, nothing's changed.
Americans or people from other parts of Europe may not always notice, but Premier League tourists aren't always welcome at every part of Premier League grounds. And when West Ham first moved from Upton Park to the London Stadium, you had a lot more tickets on the market, and people would go in with all kinds of allegiances and just be used to sitting and buying their popcorn or whatever you're used to buying to, whereas West Ham fans were used to standing in that spot back in Upton Park, and all that transition didn't go particularly well, and you had clashes within the ground. Is that better now? Are the expectations of what you do, depending on where you sit or stand during a West Ham home game, is that clearer now?
Well, I think there's a lot to unpack there. Firstly, when West Ham moved from Upton Park, they did not take with them the stewards that were employed at Upton Park. Whether that was deliberate or whether it was part of the deal, we don't know. But the experience that had been built up by stewards at West Ham, as in all football grounds, that you can train people, but you can't train experience. You know, knowing what you're stewarding, who you're stewarding, having a relationship with that, knowing the area is really important. So we were unfortunately blessed with a bunch of people that had no idea, and as a result of that, conflict, you know, is more likely to happen because people were, as you said, you know, they've been sitting in the same seats at West Ham for some time, and they're all mixed up in a new thing, and nobody's really sure. You've also got a whole load of newer fans who maybe are coming along for a Premier League experience, and you've got older fans, you know, ho-ho legacy fans who are saying, well, hang on a minute, these are the songs we sing, right? Get used to it. So I think there's a lot of that. You could probably put that in the category of growing pains. The stewarding has got slightly better, but I feel sorry for the stewards because quite often they're up against requirements for security checks, requirements for the club that may have, and then they've got issues around the stadium being, quite absurdly, if you come to West Ham, as soon as the game kicks off, the outer ring that you walk around to get to your sort of entrance seals off because they put a sort of smoking area ready for half time in, which is absolutely ridiculous. So if you come across from Stratford and you're trying to get over the Hackney Wick side, you got to walk around the whole ground, but on the outside, before you get around the bridge. The stewards, I feel sorry for them. They don't know why that happens, but it happens. And no one's allowed to let you go through the smoking area, which no one's smoking in, by the way, because they're all watching the game, right? It's most absurd. Now, that's a smoking area. I'll go through there. And I think the big picture is that whoever owns West Ham in the future, and the current owners are allowed to sell the club as of the 31st of March, I believe, this year, because they had what we call an anti-embarrassment clause where, because they've got such a good deal on the Olympic Stadium in terms of rental, they weren't allowed to sell the club for 6 or 7 years from that deal happening. So that's up there. You would hope any new owner of West Ham United Football Club will want to do a deal to buy the real estate that it sits on and the area around it. Because we're told, by the Mayor of London and others, that the taxpayer's paying for all this stuff. And, it costs 25, 30 million a year to run the estate of where West Ham is, and West Ham paid 2 to 3 million. So there's a taxpayer hole there. So you would have hoped that the club would be able to, invest in it and then own the area and then make it the way it wants to make it, just like we used to at Upton Park.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a wonderful vision, indeed. We started the story of the Burnley game and the chaos and Paul Colborne on the pitch, and he still can't attend West Ham home games. But Hammers United, which he founded, has grown to include a lot of hard, experienced workers like you and 18,000 members. If you and those 18,000 would look in the future, let's say 5 years, what would it take for you to say that those future 5 years will have been good years for West Ham United, for the club, and for the culture and the heritage that's around it?
I'd like to see the club in new ownership. I'd like to see fans having an opportunity to be part of that ownership. I'd like to see the club and the fans admit that things haven't always been right and they need to change. So there's effort on both sides. I'd like to see the club, the owners, own the real estate that it's on, the land. And obviously I'd like to see West Ham, in the Premier League batting decently. But all of the first things I've said until to see West Ham in the Premier League doing okay, all the first things are as important. Because if you don't have that, then in 45 years' time, there won't be someone like me sitting here talking about how important it is to remember your culture and where you come from in order to know where you're going to go. I don't know. I mean, we've got a 100-year lease on that ground. It's a long time. But they tell me it flies. I don't know where we'll be. I don't see West Ham making a move again. I can't see that necessarily happening. And it looks to me that from a practical perspective, the London development legacy, whatever it is, the ex-Olympic thing that owns the ground is a kind of public quango and probably needs to get it off the books and close it down. So someone should buy the ground. What would be delicious is for fan groups to come together and buy the ground so that the club become our tenants. If we had a bit more time in our lives, we might be able to do that. But right now, it's probably not going to happen. But it would be funny.
I imagine that to be kind of an ideal scenario. I think I've told you before about my other ideal scenario. The ground is eventually going to become so shitty that it's cool again to go there, but that's perhaps the more likely one. What about the Premier League and our football as a global game? in general, if I might lead you out with this a little bit. We've complained about patterns that are specific to West Ham, but that really are symptomatic of where soccer is going as a game globally, and where soccer clubs are going as brands and understanding themselves as brands globally. Is the bubble about to burst, or will we be required to lean into all these patterns of modern football even more over the next 5, 10, 20 years?
Football is without a doubt, in terms of physical sports, football is without a doubt, the premier physical sport in terms of viewership and commercialization. I come from the video games world and I come from the esports world. Don't bet on football being the most important participation and viewership entertainment on the planet. Don't bet on that, because I think I think the video games and esports world are challenging that. And as you move into the metaverse, whoever's metaverse version it is, we will see more physicality taking place. And all I will say is organizations like FIFA, I've grown up with FIFA. When I first went to the World Cup in Spain in 1982, you could get tickets easily. And FIFA were there. It's called the FIFA World Cup, but it wasn't like in your face. It's got worse and worse and worse. Everything's got much more expensive. But let me tell you this, in my video games world, FIFA have just lost the partnership with Electronic Arts, EA Sports. That partnership brought FIFA more money than the World Cup ever would do. So that's gone now. Now FIFA think they're going to make as good a video game, right? I mean, it's taken 35 years for the FIFA video game to be as good as it is. You don't just make a new one tomorrow with a team. So I think that football, it starts with FIFA, it ends with FIFA. I think there's going to be challenges around this. And I think that just because football's become the world game and everyone loves it and all the rest of it, doesn't mean that it's going to continue to be the be-all and end-all for us. And ultimately, if certainly in the UK, if going to watch a football match with your friends and having good fun is the preserve of rich middle-class people, watch out, because football always used to be a working-class game. Now, that's not the same in Germany. And my German friends, I've got Dortmund friends, St. Pauli friends, they will say, we pay nothing to get into the game because the clubs want us to bring our children and our nephews and so on, our nieces. That's what it's about. It's like, can we make sure that the fan base feels part of it? It's wanted, rather than it's just there to exploit for every nickel and dime that they can get. And I think you saw that with Bayern Munich. They made this very, very simple utterance and said, well, we could charge more for our season tickets and it puts a few more million on our revenue. But you know what? We want a full ground. We want young supporters to come. We want from different social demographics to come. We don't want it to be above the working person. So I fear that in Britain, which is the home of professionalisation under rules of football, the founder of it all, I fear, born out of the Industrial Revolution and the trading revolution, I wonder, if we're going to lose our roots, if we're going to lose what it means for people like me to talk to people like you for an hour about the stuff that we love.
Well, hopefully, as long as we do, not all is lost. Neither at West Ham United, nor at the Premier League, nor in soccer globally. We've talked about one particular club with one particular legacy in East London, a particular history and particular challenges. But even if I wasn't supporting this club, which I am, I would say thank you. Thank you, Andy. Thanks to Paul and the other Andy and all the people at Hammers United and the 18,000 members who are working for a fan-minded change and future in soccer.
Well, that's very kind of you, Philip.
Thank you for your time as well today and for walking us through your work and your background a little bit. I think we learned a lot, and I look forward to, hopefully, this May making it to what is now called the London Stadium. as well and see things for myself.
You can come and be our guest anytime you want. The best days for Hammers United and the best days for West Ham United are ahead of us. Don't worry about that. But they'll only be ahead as long as everyone pulls together and works for it. And we're going to be doing that.
That's a wonderful note to end on. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, and be well.
Pleasure, Philip. See you later.
Knees up, Mama Brown. Knees up, Mama Brown. Under the table you must go. E-I-E-I-E-I-O. If I catch you bending, I'll saw your leg right off. Knees up, don't get a breeze up. Knees up, Mama Brown. Oh my, what a rock song. What a rock song. Oh, what a rock song.
That is Knees Up Mother Brown, an old East London Cockney staple, and also a staple at West Ham for a long time. It's also the name of the oldest and best online forum for West Ham United fans. Check it out. In 2 weeks, we will move to Munich, Germany. Not to the red side that plays in the Champions League all the time there, but to the blue side of the city on the south end that plays in the third German league right now. Until then, I hope you can take some time and leave a few stars, ratings, and or subscriptions on the podcast platform of your choice. It would really help me out. Thank you for listening to this, and I look forward to talking with you again in 2 weeks. Be well.